what are your experiences with the LaRouche organization? And can you give us some more information about that from the last year?
In English, I'm a political scientist and historian, so I've been looking at it from an academic perspective. And I really would just like to start with two observations, one from 1962 by perhaps the most famous of post-war fascists, Maurice Bardèche, in his 1962 What is Fascism? He reminds us that the single party, the secret police, the public displays of Caesarism, even the presence of a Führer are not necessarily attributes of fascism, let alone the reactionary thrust of political alliances. The famous fascist methods are constantly revised and will constantly continue to be revised. More important than the mechanism is the idea which fascism has created for itself, with another name, another face, and with nothing which betrays the projection from the past, with the form of a child we do not recognize and the head of a young Medusa. The order of Sparta will be reborn, and paradoxically it will, without doubt, be the last bastion of freedom and the sweetness of living.
Ja, ich frage mein Plenum weiter. So, was ist Ihre Erfahrung gewesen mit der LaRouche-Organisation? Erstmal vielen Dank, dass Sie im Plenum
I would only suggest that 15 years later, Lyndon LaRouche had his own view of this, and he said himself, it is not necessary to wear a brown shirt to be a fascist. It is not necessary to wear a swastika to be a fascist. It is not necessary to call oneself a fascist to be one. It is simply necessary to be one. And I believe my own background and my own interests in the case stem from a question. It seems relatively easy to be able to detect military camouflage, but for some reason political or cultural camouflage in the 21st century would seem much harder to detect.
Okay, excuse me.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah,
I beg your pardon that I just now take the opportunity to give my expertise that I found out when you were in my office, and since then I tried to follow what has happened when your son died. Und das ist der Grund, warum ich jetzt das Wort nehmen muss, weil ich leider zu wenig Zeit habe. Ich möchte nur...
I would like to say the following. Because of the death of Jeremiah Duggan, I asked a psychiatrist, and she didn't make a real expertise, but she did give a description from her perspective as a psychiatrist, how she would assess the conditions surrounding Jeremiah's death. And I would like to give three quotations. And it seems to me that this death has something to do with this movement, because the psychiatrist wrote explicitly that she, working with the circumstances of the death, does not conclude that your son Erica Duggan had a risk of suicide, but that it was the surroundings in which he must have been, the surroundings of this movement, and that contributed to his death. Her central statements. Following what we can possibly know, there is no evidence. There's no evidence of possible risk of suicide. That's the core statement of a psychiatrist who has studied such suicides in much detail and continually deals with such cases. And she continues, an influence of third parties on the accident can, in my opinion, she says, cannot be excluded with certainty. I am not a lawyer, nor am I a physician, but my common sense, my reason tells me that this matter should be taken up once again, because I trust the judgment of the mother and of all those who knew Jeremiah, and in the end, I also trust this very precise statement of an expert psychiatrist that other circumstances must be taken into account if a last word on the death of your son is to be said. And I hope, my colleague Ströbele, that maybe we together, or working with others, we can make sure that this case is not forgotten, but that it is taken up again in which form ever appropriate, because I believe that we owe it to your son and we owe it to you, Mrs. Duggan, that this case is not dealt with in the manner with which it has been dealt with so far.